Sangha Jodan Soki, Shonam Lajin, Jabari, Dani Kevzi, Dangi, Jenson Jabba, Sonangi, Rola Pincher Sangha, Drapacha, Hosan, Chantam, Dewatam, Dewa, Gidan, Demarki, Dungalton, Dungi, Gidan, Dawaki, Dunga, Mewa, Dewatam. Yaran Janan, Yana, Tan, Yona, Nepar, Gurchi, Sobawa Shoda Sabadama, Sobawa Shodo Home. One of his poems, the second Dalai Lama writes, the great masters came from all directions, walking like ducks to a lotus pond, and I was sitting there, expected to turn the wheel of Dharma to such a depth of profundity of which the arrow with the news of its profundity would reach to the top of the universe. And he was just talking to a bunch of dumb Tibetans. So my challenge is much more. I've got the cream of the Theosophists out here. Walks like ducks, because when people meditate, they get a little bit bow-legged. They will look like cowboys. If you see the Dalai Lama walk out, it's like the duck walk. Whenever I come into a teaching, I always imitate that to pretend that I meditate a lot. You can meditate or you can develop the meditation walk, duck walk. The talk today, the subject of today's workshop, it was actually chosen by Stephanie. She thought it would be fun to do something on that subject because, well, death can be fun. Many years ago, I did a book called Death and Dying, the Tibetan Traditions for Penguin Arcana. Sort of happened by accident. I was in India and I was coming west and I thought, well, it'd be good to take some manuscripts when I go through England. Maybe I'll come across visit some publishers and see if they're interested in anything. Then I had a dream one night when I was walking down a street and I saw a sign blowing through the wind. And in the wind, and the next day I was walking to the British Museum where they've got the biggest collection of Tibetan books in Europe is in their basement. And a Lama friend was the curator, so I was going to go by and see them. And as I walked down the street, there was the sign blowing in the wind. And so I went in and said, oh, I'm a writer, and if there's anyone here interested in Tibet stuff. So they whisked me into an editorial office, and they said, well, we started a new series, a new imprint called Arcana, and we want to do 40 books a year for the next 3 years. And we'd like to do 2 or 3 on Tibet. So great that you dropped in, and let's see what you're doing. And one of them was a book on Death and Dying, the Tibetan Tradition. And I only had a very rough copy with me because I'd been sort of working on it slowly over the years around other projects. And a mouse had eaten off a whole corner of the manuscript. It was all gone. And you know, when mice make a nest next to something, they also have babies, and then they feed their babies there, and there's lots of poo-poo and mice pee-pee, so it also has a little bit of a unique smell to it. So I said, well, I've got that one, but that's the one she was interested in of the 3 or 4 things I was working on. I said, why don't I retype it and get it done nicely, because it's like this mouse thing. And she said, oh, no, we don't mind the mice pee-pee and mice poo-poo. Just leave it here and we'll photocopy it and send you back the original and look through it for whether what. And so then they went for it and did it. And it came out in England as Death and Dying, the Tibetan Tradition. Later, it was republished in the States by Snowline. They bought the American rights to it and published it as Living in the Face of Death. If you buy books from Snowline, that's it, yes. Without the mouse poo-poo.
Oh, I asked for that extra.
Yeah, with the mouse poo-poo, it's extra, yeah. But Snowline likes to always change titles, so most of my books with them, and most people who have books with them, after a book goes out of print, they leave it out of print for 2 or 3 years, and then they bring it out with a new title. Basically because I think Americans have very short attention spans. And they'll read a book and they'll put it away, and then they'll buy a book with a different title and they start reading it and they say, this seems very familiar. It's like, I really understand this stuff. Glenn is such a clear writer. It's like he's speaking to something I already know. Really, it was resonating within me to something I already know. So some of my books have come out with as many as 3 different titles, and the unsuspecting population, no one would read the same book 3 times if it's on their shelf, you see. And the reality is most people don't get a book on enlightenment unless they read it 3 times. So I think it's Snowline's strategy for how to educate the American reading public. Basically, I did that first book as a kind of a unfolding of events. Started that I was working as a field, when I lived in Darmstadt for the 12 years I studied there, I would make a lot of my support money by doing field work for film companies, recording journalists and so forth. And one of them was a film on a cremation ritual, a Buddhist cremation ritual, sort of a reading of the Tibetan Book of the Dead to someone as they were being cremated. And out leading up to the cremation and with the family and the sort of whole kind of study of death from how Himalayan Buddhists take it. So I'd ended up with a lot of material from then. Another time, a recording agent, a fellow doing a recording of Himalayan music, wanted to do something up in, I think, the Sanskar area or Spiti area of Tibet. And I did another book on a translation of a book that he wanted, which had the background of the sort of spiritual traditions of that valley. And it had to do with the death of a very extraordinary Lama who kind of planned his own death as a way of his giving his final teaching. And then for a German magazine, I'd done another article. It was quite long, maybe. So bit by bit, I came up with about 10 articles and wanted to put them together. Sort of the books sort of started like that. And as it went on, I started to get a deeper sort of appreciation for the wisdom of death awareness that the Buddhists have. And so the book really became that. It could be like death as an inspiration for wisdom, or death as guidance to wisdom. So I think the way we'll look at the workshop today is this morning we'll look mostly at what we call the sutra side, or the ordinary ways in which we cultivate awareness of death, or we contemplate death, which we use the reality of death as something to enhance our living, our daily life, and to give deeper meaning to our life and deeper centeredness. In the afternoon, we'll look at the tantric side of things, which death in Tantra has 2 sides to it. One is how in our daily meditation, we do a kind of Kundalini yoga in which the death process is somewhat simulated or induced. And at night, we practice dream yoga as the dream body being equivalent to the Bardo body. So in the afternoon, we'll do that side of things, the Tantra side of the death equation. And this morning, mostly the Sutra side. When we look at the Sutra side, the Buddha said that the meditation on death and dying, death and impermanence, is one of the great teachers, one of our great teachers. That merely by contemplating death and dying in the right way, our life can become more meaningful and more profound. And here it works on 2 sides. One, you can say, in Buddhism we always talk about these 2 levels of reality. The ultimate level of reality, which is emptiness, or shunya, we call it emptiness, beyond ego, beyond duality. And the other is the conventionally appearing side of reality. In other words, what we see, what we smell, what we hear, what we taste, what we touch, and what we think about what we see, smell, taste, touch, and hear. So the conventional is often called Kunzobdamba in Tibetan, which means the deceptive level of reality, because it comes with a hint of duality. That is to say, if you look at Glen, you see Glen as something separate from the rest of the universe. And Glen looks like something solid and something unchanging and so on and so forth. You have a sense of a real Glen who is different than you. Different than the chair, different than the table, different than the building, and so on. On the ultimate level of reality, when we take away all of the appearing nature, or we look behind all of the appearing nature, we come to the unchanging truth of ultimate reality. It's often called emptiness because it lacks everything that we normally think of when we think of the thing. Like, for instance, if you take the word God to a Christian, it means something. Take away everything that God means to a Christian, and you actually come closer to God than by looking at what the Christian thinks about God. Or a Muslim with Allah, or me thinking about myself, or you thinking about something. The thing that appears to the mind is further from the real nature, is the furthest thing from the real nature. You could say a little bit like the tip of the iceberg that gives a hint of something there, but beyond that is the emptiness nature. So when we use the idea of death and dying, the reality of death, as an object of contemplation, we do so on two sides. One is to deepen our wisdom, which means knowledge of shunya, or the ultimate level of reality. And secondly, to learn to accommodate the conventional level of reality, or harmonize better with conventional nature of reality, otherwise known as deceptive level of reality. Teaching on impermanence is given in various ways during the history of the Buddhist tradition. In Sri Lanka, in the time of the Buddha, and in Sri Lanka even today, people would go to a charnel ground where bodies are put outside at the edge of a jungle and just watch the bodies as they are eaten by animals and pecked by birds, and as the eyeballs come out and the guts fall out and the stink and the stench of death rises in the air, and so on and so forth. One experiences it with all five senses, seeing it, hearing it in the terms of the animals eating the bodies. And I don't know about tasting, but from scent comes an effect on the taste buds. When we smell a delicious food, our mouth salivates, and we smell something really repulsive, we almost want to throw up our food. We get the instinct to vomit. Often we see in police movies when they go into the autopsy room, the rookies always vomit. It's because of the link between smell and taste. They would do touch in the sense that often if at the end the bones of the body sometimes would be burned and cremated, and the meditators would take some of the ashes and smear it on their faces and put it in their hair. They still do that in India with what they call the Nat Babas, the guys who wander for 12 years, and they wander to the 12 great Shiva temples. And those 12 great Shiva temples all have cremation pyres beside them, and religious Hindus very often bring their deceased family members to those funeral pyres for cremation. But Buddha said that before we do the meditation on death, we should meditate on how precious is life and how wonderful is human life. Otherwise, we can become depressed. We can become morbid, and we can think, oh, well, everyone dies and everything's impermanent, so nothing matters, and so on. And so people can go the wrong way through the meditation. And this isn't exclusive to meditating on death. Every kind of meditation can take someone in the wrong way. For instance, if you do Kundalini yoga, because it enhances your sexual energies and sexual powers, you can become sort of overly sexualized, so to speak. If you do shamatha meditation, in other words, peaceful meditation, you can become a bit of a dullard because you basically sit with your mind in a very dull state, a fixed state with no activity. And so you become like one of those meditators who doesn't have much to say about anything in the universe, and just becomes overly quiescent it is. So whatever meditation we do, there may be, there are certainly many potential benefits, but if we do the meditation wrong, there's also negative side. Even simple meditations like love and compassion. We have to practice love and compassion in context to our life in general. If you become overly compassionate without the wisdom, you just basically run out and empty the family coffers, feeding, stray dogs and cats. I mean, I know people who spend more on their dogs and cats than would feed half the starving people in Africa. And there's one friend of mine in Pittsburgh commented that he's allergic to cats, but he keeps 2 of them and he loves them so much he can't give them up even though he's allergic to them. And as a result, he has to take an anti-allergen injection every day, and it gives him a case of exceedingly sore testicles. The anti-allergen. So anyway, whatever it is we do, there's always ups and downs about it. What we want to do in meditation is have the right side of things. So if we become overly compassionate without the wisdom, I'm not saying that he's not wise to keep his cats, but it's more of a sacrifice for them than I would personally make. In fact, I would probably pay someone handsomely to take them off my hands, give them a happy home in the countryside, or if failing that, I may sell them to a Korean restaurant. No. If any Koreans are present, my apologies. They prefer dogs. I know, because I'm the director of a Buddhist center in Korea, you see, so I teach there. So whatever meditation it is we do, from beginning one to top one, there's always benefits to meditation. There's also some potential for wrong meditation. Therefore, it's important, as said, when you practice meditation, to have a qualified teacher. For that reason, most books on Tibetan spiritual practice begin with a teaching on Guru Yoga, or Guru Lama Temba is often the word in Tibetan, which means relying on a qualified teacher, or leaning. Temba literally means to support, so leaning on a qualified teacher. Because even simple meditations, if done incorrectly, can take us in undesired, and unproductive directions. You only have to visit California to notice how true that really is. Or if I'm in California, I say, you only have to visit New York or Chicago to know how true that really is. But so all the Tibetan books always start with the talk of the importance of having a teacher, so that when you meditate, the desired results are achieved rather than the undesirable ones. And there's stories in the Buddhist texts about how people who did the meditation on impermanence and death without the proper understanding had unhappy results and just became depressed and unhappy. I think I've told the story a few times here of how the Buddhist vow of not to kill, why a monk should not kill. The way it's explained by the Nyingma Lama Mitpam in a book I translated is because some of the monks meditating on impermanence became so upset that they wanted to commit suicide, and a couple of them did, and one was like unwilling to do so. And so he wanted to trick someone else into doing it, so he said, into killing him, because he didn't have the courage to commit suicide himself. So he said to one of the wobbly, sort of mentally wobbly monks that Buddha says we should all be compassionate and fulfill the wishes of others. So I really want to die, so it would be very virtuous if you would help me. And not only would that be virtuous, good karma for you, but in addition, you'll get my begging bowl and my robes. And so the monk bumped him off, and then he thought, well, that's good. I helped him out. I could help out a few others. And that day he murdered 60 monks. He went to the stupa where they all walk around, come up during the day to take a walk around, and one by one bumped off 60. So come the next full moon ceremony when all the monks gather to do purification ritual, Buddha looked around and said, oh, verily, O Ananda. You have to put an Indian accent, a modern Anglo-Indian accent if you want to emulate the Buddha's speech. Verily, O Ananda, we have so few monks at this gathering today. What, forsake, has happened to the rest? And the monk, Buddha, I helped them all. And plus, I've got all these extra bowls and robes if anyone else wants to become monks. And so Buddha made the rule, monks aren't allowed to kill. Now this is the way it's written in a book written to be explained to young monks who became a monk at age 7 or 8. So it's sort of like the childhood story of why monks shouldn't kill. But the reality that is told at all does show that that if one doesn't practice these contemplations in correct context and aiming for particular effects, they can definitely go in the wrong direction. And whether or not any monk actually did murder 60 others, as told by Lama Mipam, is kind of open to question. I don't think that ever really happened, but it does make a good story. Kyabji Song Rinpoche used to say, I'm not a better teacher than anyone else. I just remember more of the good stories. So when I heard him say that, I thought, oh, I'll have to remember whatever good story I hear. But the idea with every meditation, every kind of meditation, it can become negative if we don't do it right. If we go through the sort of plethora of standard Buddhist meditations, even meditating upon, relying upon the teacher, I think some people take the language of that, which is always written very poetically, in a literal way, and sort of become devotion people rather than real practitioners. They become basically reliant rather than looking for their own liberation and so forth. If we go to the thing of meditating on impermanence, it can make people a little bit overly nervous about being alive. Look, if we meditate on karma and cause and effect, it can make people overly careful. They can overthink doing a simple thing rather than just do it fluidly and naturally. And if we think about suffering in the world, then that can become like, oops, better be careful, and everything becomes overly stressed. And if we take compassion, we can spend too much time looking outside at objects requiring our attention. If we think of love or patience, we can become overly patient with, in a kind of overly, we can not take responsibility for teaching people the need for not being rude and obnoxious. We can sort of go too far in that direction. If we do the emptiness meditation, which brings complete liberation if done properly, we can just sort of become somewhat apathetic about things. If we go into samadhi or meditation, we can become addicted to the pleasures of deeper meditation. And the same in all the different levels of Tantra meditation. If we do incorrectly, we can get undesirable effects. If we do correctly, we get desirable effects. But that said, it's better to meditate and have undesirable effects and not meditate at all and have nothing happen. But rather than meditate incorrectly and have undesirable effects, which is better than doing nothing, it's better to meditate correctly and have desirable effects. For that reason, the Tibetan texts begin by explaining, by speaking about the importance of cultivating a good relationship with a teacher, and that practicing meditation in a kind of a living environment like that. As it's often said, the the teacher's mind is the mirror, and one looks in the teacher's mind and sees the mirror of one's own spiritual progress or lack of progress, one's own doing it right as opposed to fudging it up a bit, and so on. Before impermanence and death meditation, the importance of meditating on the preciousness of being alive. And the Tibetans do that in a very particular way. They start each day by just meditating on how rare is human life compared to the number of mosquitoes or sardines or anchovies, cockroaches, bugs, fleas, and so on and so forth. And people think, oh, 5 billion, that's quite a few, but really, you can have that many fleas just on one elephant. Maybe not, but you probably have that many cockroaches like in 2 New York high-rises. Certainly on the Lower East Side. And how rare it is in that kind of way, how rare it is in terms of meaning. If we think back over human history, the number of human beings who have become exemplary models of human greatness. People like Buddha, Christ, Mohammed, Glenn Mullin. Just checking to see if you're sleeping. If we think back when we see such great examples of how people achieved the perfections of the human spirit. And we see people who went from very low levels to very high levels. Someone like Angulimala during the time of the Buddha had murdered almost 1,000 people and was therefore seemed beyond salvation, you could say. But then met the Buddha and thought it might be wise to look for a career change, and became a monk and became a meditator. In those days, becoming a monk didn't mean like today, because there were no vows to becoming a monk. Becoming a monk really just meant becoming a meditator. It was only as time passed that these sort of monastic vows were attached to them. When there became so many of them, you had to compensate for idiots. In the beginning, Buddha said we shouldn't have any vows or any precepts. People should just learn to meditate and to think, and they'll always know what's right to do. But then they had those guys known as the 6 idiots who did all the things that brought all the complaints that brought about the need for precepts. One of them was a reincarnation, previous life of one of my own teachers, according to his official biography. He was one of the 6. The 6 idiots are known as, or the 6 foolish monks or mendicants. And Buddha said, we won't make any precepts. We'll just basically, if we have a complaint, we'll discuss it. And if we get the complaint, we'll see if it's really necessary to make a precept, because just remembering precepts is burdensome. The other problem is if you make a precept, it becomes so much fun to break it or to skirt around it. It's like, how close can I go? So meditation on the preciousness of being, the preciousness of being human. We see beings like Angulimala killed almost 1,000 people, then becomes a meditator under the Buddha and achieves enlightenment in one lifetime. Or Milarepa murdered 32 people, gave up that way of living and achieved enlightenment in one lifetime. We see people who were robbers and who were bandits and so on and so forth. One time when I was on a teaching tour in Spain, in Madrid, there was a monk who had just come over to teach in the Dharma Center, and he'd come over about 6 months earlier, and there was only one other person in town who could speak Tibetan, which was his translator. And he was so enthusiastic to see me, because I could speak Tibetan and he could actually chit-chat, that he would wake me up at 6 in the morning and just start talking until midnight. And so after a couple of days, I told him, well, there's only 2 things I like in Tibetan monastic life. One is like the fighting monk stories, and the other are like Tibetan sex jokes. And he said, well, when I was a young kid, I was a fighting monk I became a monk at age 6 or 7, and I was a fighting monk at Dub Dub until I was 23. And so the fighting monks generally weren't monks. I mean, they didn't have precepts of celibacy and all that sort of stuff. They just went in the monastery. And they basically made up a kind of a Crips and Bloods kind of street gangs around the monastery. And they would defend the honor of the monastery. And if Mongols or Chinese or Arabs or Indians or Nepalis invaded, they would run out with clubs and swords and bows and arrows and straighten things up. I think we need something like that here in the Theosophical Society. Remember back in the days when Billy Graham used to picket outside? And when he went to college here, you say, if you would have had your dub-dubs, your fighting theosophists, you would have straightened them out very quickly. Anyway, the point being that in Tibet, some of the monasteries had 5,000 or 10,000 monks, and they tried to make a place for everyone. So if you weren't a meditator, you could paint. If you weren't a painter, you could be an academic. If you weren't an academic, you could go into business if you weren't, and raise money for the monastery. If you weren't that, you could be a cook. If you weren't that, you could be a gardener, and so on and so forth. But one of the things you could be is a fighting monk, which you could say in some ways was the least spiritual of the whole tradition. But then at 23, age 23, he had an epiphany. It went from cruising and bruising to the Geshe training program, finished that with flying colors, came out, did his 3-year retreat, and became a great Lama. So the point being, people like that, even though they had checkered pasts, became very great beings. Very often in India and Tibet, if someone was a criminal of sorts, and they had a change of heart, they could go to a high teacher and ask to become a student of the teacher. And the teacher accepted them. The teacher could speak to the local authorities and ask for a kind of a reprieve, probationary period or something like that, you could call it. And the person could take up training under them. And if that worked, then as long as that person seemed to be progressing and the teacher took responsibility for them, they would continue to be given reprieve. And I think there was a sort of a time limit after 5 years or 10 years, something like that, then whatever crimes they had committed would be forgiven. Even murder would be forgiven, and let alone the lesser crimes of robbery and banditry and so on and so forth. But if we look back in this first meditation over history and we think of all the greatnesses that humans have accomplished, we can see that humans have one of the most transformable spirits or souls of species. We can go from being very horrible beings like mass murderers like Angulimala to becoming an enlightened being, a great master, a great mystic. At the same time, we can start out fairly normal, and through taking everything in the wrong way, we can completely fritter away our gifts and our opportunities and go from good to bad to very bad to worse to complete reject to pretty well unreformable. Might as well just hang them and be done with it. I don't know. Maybe not that, but almost to there. So this first meditation, Milu Rinpoche, the preciousness of being human, is combined with meditation on joy, how to take responsibility for keeping our own mind in a joyful state, how to see joy as something that is our kind of human right, that every human has the ability to essentially claim joy and rest the mind in joy regardless of external circumstances. We can always have inner peace and inner happiness, inner joy, regardless of whether there's something to eat, regardless of whether there's peace and quiet or it's noisy, regardless of whether there's things to worry about or not to worry about. So the first meditation is very much connected to that, learning to be joyful and appreciative of the human situation. So maybe why don't we, for 15 minutes, why don't we practice a simple meditation on that? And it's a simple breathing meditation. Buddha called it breathe in with joy, breathe out with joy. So feel the pleasure of the passing breath. Let the body relax and the mind relax. And at the same time, to feel the pleasure or joy of being human. And we'll do that for about 5 minutes. And then after that, Jesu Yi Rong, taking joy in the world. Think about all of the good things in the world, all the things that are sources of joy, like the great Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, or great saints, the great mystics, the great writers, the great artists, and so on, things that are sources of joy. Tsongkhapa, the founder, the guru of the first Dalai Lama and founder of the Yellow School, he wrote that creating 100,000 objects of merit, or thinking about someone else creating them, and thinking with joy about someone else who has created them, both produce an equal amount of positive energy, or good energy. So you can go out and create 100,000 good deeds, or you can think about someone doing them, and you get the same amount of good karma, or good energy. And I think that's very true. People who put their minds on positive things stay in the sphere of the positive. And when we put the mind on negative things, we get dragged into the negative. So this idea that we can control, or we can manage our own inner joy, our own inner happiness. And doing it by breath awareness and breath control, breathe in with joy, breathe out with joy. And secondly, by being mindful. That's one of the, what they call the Trempa. One of the 6 great mindfulnesses is mindfulness of all the goodness and joy, sources of goodness and joy in the world, past, present, and future. The other thing with meditation, my Zen teacher used to always say, to always meditate with a half smile on your face. Not only meditate, but always keep a half smile on your face. So I always liked that, because I used to like cowboy movies. My favorite was movies like Shane, where he'd say, someone says something bad and mean to him, and he says, smile when you say that. And so always keep a half smile on your face, regardless of what's going on. If your mind is relaxed and joyful, and your physical body language is joyful, it always gives you an edge, regardless of what you do. Back in high school and college, when I was a boxer, we used to always like smile at one another at the beginning, and if someone hits you really hard, you kind of smile back like, I barely noticed that. But keeping a half smile has an effect on the whole body chemistry, an effect on your whole mood. It's like if you put on a beautiful piece of clothing, you immediately feel a little better. And a smile does the same, keeping a small smile on your face. Are you smiling? I'm watching. Half smile, half smile. We want to see a half smile. Gawandi, Nuranda, just a melangan, and Doachi, Malabate, Sala, Kubar Show. Change some sorry, but she might keep on a kick, keep on Yamba, maybe young Condu, Power Show. We take a 15-minute break, and people can stretch their legs and use washroom if you need, and then we'll continue. So as I was saying earlier, all Tibetan books begin with the importance of relying upon or having a relationship with a competent teacher. I think in general this doesn't always mean a day-to-day contact. Sometimes these are somewhat abstract. Tibetans do a simple meditation for that, where one visualizes something like a Buddha Amitabha in the space in front, a Buddha sitting, hands crossed, and one thinks that's an embodiment of all my teachers, and in particular of my main spiritual teacher. Then one makes requests for success in meditation, and Tibetan word Chinlab often translated as blessings, but it really means power to change. Chin is power, and lab means wave or change, the power to change, the power to transform, and also meaning the power to accomplish, the power to grow in the right direction. And then one brings that, having made that, usually the Lama sends out streams of white lights from crown chakra, red lights from throat chakra, blue lights from heart chakra. They come to one's three chakras and give all transforming energies or powers to change physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And that completely fills one's body. Also, it's said they give then all three lights coming together all over one's body like rainbow energies. These grant the four empowerments or four initiations. The first, totally purifying all negative karma created by physical means. The second, all negative karma created by emotional and communicative speech. The third, by mind. And the fourth, by the innate unity of those three. They also bestow the four tantric empowerments. The first being the empowerment to accomplish the form of enlightenment. The second, the power to accomplish the Sambhogakaya, or the beatific, emotional body of enlightenment. The third, the power to accomplish Dharmakaya, or the pure spirit or soul of enlightenment. And the third, Svabhava Kaya, the quintessence of enlightenment, which is beyond description. So I often say, for instance, people will do meditation retreats in faraway places, as many as 3 years, 6 years, 12 years, and won't see their teachers for any of that time period, but they'll do that meditation twice daily, once in the morning when they wake up and once at night at the end of the day. And in that way, have a kind of a mystical communion with the spiritual teachers. In terms of joy and appreciating one's human life, one does the contemplations of just breathing in joy, breathing out joy, meditating on contemplating how humans can achieve every greatness, regardless. And I think often in the West we tend to externalize these things. Greatness often being taken to mean great accomplishment in some kind of physical dimension or social dimension or career dimension. And that's not part of the equation. Of course, is relevant. But more in the Enlightenment tradition is the accomplishment of inner greatness that is seen as the essence. So when we meditate on the preciousness of the human life, we make a strong determination to extract the essence of being human. And that essence means accomplishing enlightenment, accomplishing inner greatness, greatness of the soul, greatness of the spirit. Through accomplishing that greatness of the soul, greatness of the spirit, we accomplish every greatness, because wherever the mind goes, all things follow. So if we take those beings who accomplish greatness of the soul, greatness of the spirit, in general, they've also become great in many ways in world history. Like if we take someone like Buddha, he just wandered around teaching, never owned a lot of fancy race elephants or camels or great properties and things like that, but everyone on the planet knows and remembers. The same with, say, Confucius or Lao Tse, Mohammed, Christ, and so on. Even great philosophers, great thinkers. And their accomplishments, although they begin with the spirit, they begin with the soul, they find expression in the outer world and inspire greatness in others. Einstein, for instance, once commented that he considered the Buddha one of the great inspirations of his life, that he said Buddha was one of the great scientists of history, because his words that be like an analyst buying gold, cut, burn, and test in every way. And only when it adds up in your own common sense and seems practical when applied should you accept it. And of course, if we look at Buddhist traditions around the world, they don't always follow that kind of rigor. People do become lazy and tend to take things for granted. But we should, in our own life, try to follow those kinds of very quintessential advices. Taking the essence, becoming a greater human being. The Dalai Lama once commented in a teaching I attended back in India about maybe, 40 years ago, that one should analyze or examine one's mind once a month, and one should see some benefit from one's practice. One should see some transformation, some growth, some unfoldment. If one doesn't see that, it means you're not practicing correctly. He also used to say, don't become a Buddhist just to be a Buddhist. It's better to become a Buddha. And just calling yourself a Buddhist, he once said, we don't need more bad Buddhists. We've already got lots of them. And he used to say the same to the monks. If you want to be a monk, live up to the tradition. Don't just be a monk as a lifestyle or to call yourself a monk. And it's better to basically, if you're not up to the task, then disrobe and go get a job as whatever you like to be doing. So this take the essence thing is very important from the what is it? I lived in Georgia for a while. What is it they say? From the get-go. From the get-go, we want to extract the essence of being human. And that essence from beginning to middle to end is based on joy, based on learning to appreciate the simple fact that how relaxed we are and how much pleasure we feel at any given time is 99% our own responsibility. It's completely in our hands, regardless of what are the physical situations or the situations around us. We can always be relaxed and joyful. Shantideva put it very wonderfully in a verse. If there's a problem in your life and it can be fixed, you should relax and be joyful and go about fixing the problem. If there's a problem and it can't be fixed, relax and be joyful and go about just learning to live with it. There's many things we can't fix in life. We can, for instance, everyone here will be dead within another 100 or 150 years, some within 50 years, some within 30 years, some within 20 years, some within 10 years, some within 5 years, maybe some within a year or two, maybe some within a week or two or a month or two. Death itself isn't something we can fix. It is something that we can learn to live with in a very joyful, relaxed manner. Sickness, something that comes and goes throughout our life. Problems in relationships, things that come and go throughout our life. What we can do is learn to be wiser, more compassionate, more gentle, and from every experience to extract the essence. Extract the essence means regardless of what happens, we learn to grow, unfold, and become greater by means of it. What's that American expression? If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And it should be done, it should make you stronger in a joyful and relaxed way, or inner peace and inner joy. This word in Tibetan, shi-de, we use the word world peace often, gemling shi-de is a Tibetan expression. World peace doesn't actually mean world peace. Shi-de, shi means peaceful or relaxed. Also has a sense of freedom. Shiva also has the sense of freedom. And dewa means pleasure, can mean physical pleasure, or it can mean happiness or joy. Like, for instance, an American monk friend who used to teach here 20 years ago or something, his name was Pende. Benefit and joyful. Beneficial and joyful. Beneficial and happy, something like that. But shi-de, how always to be peaceful. Dalai Lama often talks about the peace movement. We should begin it with ourselves. The best contribution to world peace is to become relaxed and joyful, to become peaceful and joyful yourself. And even if, like him, you're a fly in China's ointment, or like, what was that Indian character who worked for Indian independence, the lawyer from England?
Gandhi.
Yeah, that's his name. I can never remember names of lawyers. Anyway, yes, again, he was always relaxed and always joyful, and he went about making great changes in the world and great benefits, and facing great conflicts, facing terrible violence at various times. But he always did so with a sense of inner relaxation and inner joy. And certainly sometimes we may be fearful, sometimes we may be a little nervous about things, that we can't always face every challenge with complete heroism. But we can always, we can learn to always accent our inner relaxation and our inner joyful posturing. As I said earlier, it begins with the breath. Breathe in with joy, breathe out with joy. And we see this basic principle used throughout the world in very simple secular ways. Like, for instance, when I was a kid, I was a scrapper. I loved boxing and the martial arts. So we used to have the expression, when if you get angry, just take 10 deep breaths and your anger passes. And then when you get in a scrap, you'll be much more effective. If you get in a scrap based on anger, you'll probably lose, because you won't have the right strategy, or you won't have the right approach to it. So Dalai Lama always says, whatever we do in life, we do more successfully and more efficiently if we're relaxed and if we're joyful. And whether it's a boxing match or a martial arts match, or it's a chess game or a backgammon game, or it's an argument with our kids, or a point of difference, a philosophical discussion in which we hold different positions with our kids or our friends or our parents or whatever. If we stay relaxed and joyful, we can always be more successful in bringing about a happy outcome, or a beneficial outcome. Take the essence. Once we have a strong basis of appreciating being human, when we feel being human, the first Dalai Lama writes in his one of his texts, we should meditate on the great benefits of being human until we feel so appreciative that we start to cry with joy. So I think I'll just keep talking about joyful of being human until one of you starts to cry. Who's going to volunteer so we can go on to the next point? Who's good at crying? I don't want to see George Bush Sr. crocodile tears about those poor Kuwaitis being invaded. I want to see real tears. First Dalai Lama didn't say cry crocodile tears. I'm not sure what a crocodile tear is, but it must be big, because they certainly have big eyes. But he says we should feel so appreciative of being human that we're just thinking of being human and the many great blessings of the human life form, that we become joyful to the point of ecstasy. And then we go on to meditating on the impermanence of things and on death. In Tibetan it's called Chiwa Mitakpa, death and impermanence. Dalai Lama comments in one of his discourses that in the West we have a lot of books called Death and Dying. He comments we should, in the Tibetan world, it's not like that, it's dying and death. Calling it death and dying is putting the horse before the cart. Once you're dead, there's no time to bother. It's no longer necessary to talk about dying. But Buddha pointed out, as I mentioned earlier in the beginning, that Buddha pointed out that meditating on Chiwa Mitakpa, death and impermanence, benefits both in terms of the ultimate reality of things, the emptiness side of things, and also in terms of the conventional level of reality or the appearing nature of things. We get benefits from both sides. And how so? Because when we meditate on impermanence, impermanence points to emptiness. The fact that all things change and all things are always in a state of change, how do they change? They change because they're always in a state of flux with the world around them. They're always influenced by the world around them. So my body, as I'm sitting here, it looks to you much like the same body that was here when you walked in, but it's not. It's a completely different entity. Now I've breathed in and out, and it's all different air, as have you. And I had a cup of tea, which wasn't there before, and now that's like Mr. T. Glenn. And there's like Glenn with tea. And so the fact that this body looks the same, looks solid, and of course I'm losing moisture through my pores, so some of the liquid that was there before has now gone, but still you don't notice that. So the wisdom side of things shows the non-duality aspect, how everything is in a state of change or a state of flux. And it's always taking in new properties from the surrounding world and letting properties out into the surrounding world. And there's nothing there that stops. There's nothing in a static situation at all. So by meditating on death and impermanence, not just about our own death and our own impermanence, but how each moment this body dies, and each moment it's a new body. It's like one moment, one moment, one moment, one moment, one moment, one moment. And so that's a wisdom training, and it takes us towards the ultimate reality, or the emptiness nature, the shunya nature. Because when we notice how things are always in a state of flux, from rocks and stones and trees to people to animals to events and so on, we notice how they have no self-nature, no rungshin. They have no demba truba. They have no truly existent, findable quality. Although Glenn is the greatest living being on the planet today, there is no Glenn. It's a catch-22. It's good to be so great, but too bad there's no me. So often in Buddhism we see this word translated as egolessness, no self-nature. But I think that's very confusing to the West, because in the West we use ego in so many different ways, and none of those are the meaning here in Buddhism. I mean, the word, I think, first comes up in popular American diction as a Freudian term. Sort of ego is what stands between the id, what we like to do, and how we eventually do it. So I look at you and you say something and I want to punch you in the nose. That's my id talking. But my ego says, no, I can't do that. I'll have to walk down slowly behind him when we're going to dinner, and I'll trip him and he won't know it's me. That's my ego at work. So it has that sense. And then somehow ego became a synonym for pride or arrogance. Someone is, what an egotistic, well, that guy has a big ego. If we say someone has a big ego, it doesn't mean that they're actually able to do things better, more cleverly, that they don't let their id rule and they learn to express their id in ever better ways, which is what having a big ego should mean. Instead, it comes to mean some sort of pride or arrogance, which is completely a non-meaning for completely a wrong way to use ego from the Freudian application that was its original cause of popularity. So ego here means just a concrete, separate status, nature. There's something in the rock to represent the rock. There's something in the tree that is treeness. There's something in Glen that is glenness, and so on. And when you look at Glen, you think, yes, there is a glenness. But if we look at impermanence, the Chiwamitakpa, the death and impermanent nature of Glen's body, it's changing moment to moment. Glen's mind, thoughts are rising and thoughts are flowing. It's like the water in the river. It's never the same. And the same for everything else in the universe. In this way, Buddha said, the meditation on impermanence is one of the gateways to wisdom, to cultivating wisdom. And looking at it on the other side, the conventional level of truth, or the so-called deceptive level of truth, how nothing is what it seems. How does meditating on death and impermanence help there? Because if we look at something and we think that it is what it appears, and we do that with all things, we look at them in kind of a superficial way. And therefore, a fish looks at bait on a hook and bites it, and bye-bye, Mr. Fish. And things that glitter become objects of attraction and objects of addiction, and things that don't glitter become objects of boredom, and things that anti-glitter become an object of fear and repulsion. The whole world is divided by misreading the nature of the entity. And in that way, even from ego, from the self, from the point of view of myself, I develop a sense of self, and based on that sense of a solid self, I develop relationships with solids around me in a world that is in constant state of flux. So meditating on death and impermanence of outer things changes my relationship to them. When I get a shiny new car, I appreciate that, well, it's just a shiny new car, and it's all, the shine is something that's in a state of flux, and everything else is in a state of flux. I best not hang my hat on this as kind of an object of deeper happiness, because I can get pleasure out of it, I can get joy out of it, but on the other hand, it's not going to be something that's going to deepen the crockers of my soul. And with my own self, with my own impermanence, if I meditate on my own death and my own impermanence, then again, this changes in a conventional way, the way I relate to all things around me, the way I relate to my kids, the way I relate to my friends, the way I relate to my teachers, the way I relate to my so-called enemies, people who are difficult to get along with. So Buddha said, meditate on transformation, death and impermanence in the morning. Your morning will become more real, more true, more happy, and more beneficial. Do it at lunch, your afternoon becomes more real, more true, more beneficial, more happy. Do it in the evening, and your whole night becomes more real, more true, more beneficial, and more happy. And on the conventional level, what it means when we do that is we're very careful with everything that appears. In other words, the deceptive level of truth or the conventional level of truth. I understand that every time I look at you, it may be the last time I ever see you. Next time around, you may be dead. Next time around, I may be dead. And so on. So therefore, I'm very careful in how I deal with you. It's like, well, this could be our last hurrah, guys. And if I think, so when we do the meditation on death and dying, often we sit and we think, now who do I know in the last year that's kicked the bucket? Or the last 5 years and the last 10 years? like take myself, for instance, when I trained in India, my great teachers, almost all of them now, of the 35 main teachers I had, almost all are dead. There's maybe 2 or 3 left out of all of those. Because in the Tibetan world at that time, if you were under 60, you didn't cut the biscuit to be a teacher. You had to be at least 60 generally. Most of them were 70 or 75. And so some of them lasted till their 80s, others to their 90s. So on the conventional level, when we remember the impermanence and death of things, how all things are gifts of the present moment and the future moment is indeterminate, it makes us treat that present moment with great respect and great care. It also improves our karma in the sense that when we don't treat things with respect and care, karma here means activity or work, and the kind of spin-off, energetic spin-off that comes from that. When we don't treat things with respect and with care, we have a kind of a hodgepodge of energetic spin-off and activity. Sometimes death and impermanence meditation is called the great teacher of patience. Because if I know I'm going to die in 5 minutes and someone comes up and insults me, it's not going to be something which causes me anger. If someone does something, I'm not going to give it enough attention. I'm not going to, it's not going to be a priority in my mind that someone insulted me. It's like, well, that could be right and it could be wrong. No need for me to shoot him. I'm dead in 5 minutes. I'll wait till I come back. He's old, I'll be young, I'll get my revenge now. But it's a great teacher of impatience, because we look at the person we know. They're going to be dead in a year or two, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I'll be dead any time too. Why would I allow myself to indulge in such nonsense or be distracted by such nonsense, get dragged off into such nonsense? So rather than let other people set on the worldly emotions and worldly activities, rather than allow them to set our agenda and determine our agenda, we develop the natural predisposition to set the agenda ourselves. And when we set our own agenda based on our own spiritual ethic and our own spiritual view, that agenda becomes something which fulfills our destiny, rather than becomes something which is a prey to whatever forces are at play around us. The Buddhists give all kinds of stories for this, like the great Emperor Ashoka, even though he built 84,000 stupas and thousands of Buddhist temples and so on. As he was passing away, one of the girls fanning him held the peacock feather too low and banged him on the nose with it. So he got angry at the very moment of his death. And had a negative effect in the bardo and rebirth taking. But on the other hand, had he meditated on impermanence and death throughout his life, even at the moment of death, he would have been more brave and more stable and more focused. But as it was, because he never did, even till the very moment of his death, at the very moment of death, it was like peacock feather, damn! And boom, gone. And of course, maybe that's not really what happened, but it's told as a story to show how until we get the inner side of our being straightened out and cultivated and stabilized, very silly little things can throw us off on tangents. When we do the meditation in the sutra style, and as I said, in the afternoon we'll do it in the tantric way, the way it's used for sleep and dream yoga and death and sleep being a sort of a portal to the afterlife in the human experience, the tantric view being that. In the morning, to do it from the sutra side, then generally we do in one of 3 ways. One is that we just sit down and contemplate our own passing. We kind of visualize it as though right now we were lying on our bed passing away, and this were our last moment. We kind of just visualize, yes, this is it. I'm a goner. Gosh, I'm a goner. And then at the end we think, oh no, I've got another few hours left. Okay, what will I do to make my life meaningful and to be, if I only had a few hours left, how would I use that in the most meaningful way? And of course, we have to accommodate what is our normal job and what is our normal family affair and things like that. It doesn't mean not going to work. But if you were to go to work and it would be your last day at work, how you would communicate with those around you, how you would deal with those around you. And if it were your last meal, how you would eat your last meal, the kind of awareness and appreciation you'd bring to it, and so on. The other way of meditating on it is by contemplating. And there they contemplate three things: how death comes to all beings, the inevitability of death. Secondly, the uncertainty of the time of death. And thirdly, at the time of death, how the only thing you've got is your own soul, your own spirit. Nothing else goes with you, everything else is left behind. As is said, the king leaves behind his rod with which he rules his kingdom, and the beggar leaves behind his begging bowl and walking stick. And we leave behind our family and friends. And thirdly, even this body we leave behind and all the powers that it has. And all we take with us is what we know or don't know, the depths of our spirit or the superficiality of our spirit. So when we do that contemplation on a daily basis, it's said that death, with the first one, meditating on how death is certain and inevitable, it makes us determined to stick to quintessentials, to focus on quintessentials, and secondly on how the time is uncertain, to practice the quintessential in this very moment. And thirdly, to make that practice of the quintessential the very core of our being, to bring it to the very core of our being. So we do that 3 times a day. The third is in the Lojong tradition or the Mahayana tradition. We do it sometimes by breathing. As we breathe in, we think, breathe in with joy, and this is one lifetime. And as we breathe out with joy, and we think, one lifetime is gone. I'm gone, dead. As we breathe in, we think, aha, new lifetime. As we breathe out, we think, that lifetime, gone. As we breathe, we make each breath a lifetime. Then at night, at the end of the day, before we go to sleep, normally we review our whole day in our mind, and we think everything that happened. How much were we able to hold to the essence, and how much we let slip? How much we fell away from the essence and went into superficiality in our communications with others, our own meditation practice, our own. Look, we go to work, how good a job we did fixing cars or designing rocket ships, if we really did every moment perfectly. And we try at the end of the day to bring that quintessential awareness to the fore, to review the day in the light of our own, in the wisdom of, or the mirror of our own mind. In the Lojong tradition it's said, hold to the best of two witnesses. That's one of the precepts of the practice. Hold to the best of two witnesses. The two witnesses is other people in the world who see you, but the best witness is your own self. You are your own best teacher, your own best protector. Now at the end of the day we do that, and things we feel we really messed up. Like I was at work and someone spilled coffee on my new shoes. So I went over to their desk and poured ketchup all over their work. And then they came back and put mustard on my favorite shirt. And so on. The reality is, I mean, most human beings, if they don't do self-observation, they lose a tremendous amount of their life, of their time, and of their energy to these kind of trivialities. Like sometimes I'll stay with people who practice Dharma, and they'll be talking with irritation about all kinds of people around the world from events even years ago that still don't let go. And that's with Dharma practice. Without Dharma practice, they'd be out there like with machine guns. Most quintessential is the daily practice of things, on daily practice. It's like answering emails. You know, as a traveler and teacher and whatnot, I probably get 100 emails a day. If I don't answer them all each day, basically there's no chance of ever catching up. That whole part just has to be erased, deleted, and forgotten about. And our life is much like that. If we keep each day, as Lama Yeshe used to put it, clean, clear, which was his translation of Sangye or Jangjub. For the Tibetan word for a Buddha is Sangye, sort of clean, expanded meaning clear, or Jangjub, which means clean, clear. But clean in the sense of our natural purity. Everything has a natural perfection to it if we don't clutter it up. Like something comes into your life that's unpleasant, it actually has a natural purity to it. It's only that it irritates you that makes it cluttery. It's something from your own past and your own personality spinning around to try to help you in a way. So in Lojong we say, take all challenges, take all difficulties as friends. Learn to take all challenges, all difficulties as friends. That means people who seem obnoxious, situations that seem obnoxious, things that happen in our life that seem obnoxious. Learn to see them all as friends. In other words, as things that can help you. The word trok in Tibetan really means something, has a sense of something that can benefit, something that can be good for you. It's like in boxing. If you, I like to mention that just because I like doing it as a kid. If you always box with people who don't actually challenge you, your skills never increase. Having a good sparring partner is what makes a champion. Muhammad Ali, many people say, became the great boxer he was because he boxed with his sparring partners were so great. And who was the one who became the champ after him? Frazier? What? Joe Frazier? No. What?
Holmes.
Holmes, Larry Holmes, was his sparring partner for years, and he went, I think, 48 undefeated fights as a professional. He went for 49, but he lost his 49th. He wanted to equal Rocky Marciano's record of 49 as an undefeated professional. He made it to 48. But many people say Muhammad Ali became the great fighter he was because his trainers hired him the greatest competition, the sparring partners. So in life it's a little bit like that. If you look at the present Dalai Lama, he's a very great guy, Would he have been that great if he had stayed in Tibet, sitting in the potala with everyone sitting around, telling him, what a great guy he was, and how he was an incarnation of this great Buddha of compassion, and even his shit smelled sweet. But losing his country and ending up in India and having many, many challenges made him rise to the occasion. Nelson Mandela, if he wouldn't have got chucked in the slammer for 27 years and forced to sit down and think, would he have become the great leader that he became? And what's that, the Indian lawyer guy who? Gandhi, yes. The fellow with the towel around his head. What is it that Winston Churchill called him? The naked fakir? If he wouldn't have had so many great challenges in his life, would he have achieved the greatness that he achieved? So in this way, taking our difficulties as friends, learning to see them. So when we go through our day and we see places where we've fallen short of kind of the Enlightenment ideal, as Lama Yeshe used to put it, we didn't really stay clean clear. We didn't appreciate the natural purity of things, and our mind didn't rest in a state of relaxed perfection. If that was there, if that wasn't there, then it's not that we should be critical or feel guilty or something like that, but rather, in the Kadampa tradition, it says we should rejoice as though we have found a precious treasure. Finding something that really pisses you off is a precious treasure, something that really gets your goat, because it's showing you something. And when things are just going along smoothly, it's hard to grow. Whereas the harshness of things often encourages growth. So when we do the end of the day review and we see places where we made a mess of things, then we try to contemplate them in that way. What can I learn from that? How can I grow from that? How can I transform from that? And in terms of other living beings, people who came into our lives who were obnoxious or difficult or downright unpleasant and rude, how can I wasn't laughing at you when I looked at you, Eric, because you're rude. Just sometimes rude. How we can take whatever is there and see it in a positive spin, not just for ourselves, but for that other person, that other being. Like Shantideva says, if someone insults you or hits you with a stick, you should contemplate how unfortunate it is that you have acted, your karma, you have such bad karma that you forced that person to do that. Because in a way, anything negative happens to us, we're a player in that. I think that's one of the most precious teachings in the Buddhist tradition for America. I think America, we really do have a pass the buck culture, maybe on account of the large number of lawyers. Everyone wants to sue someone or blame someone else. Everything's always someone else's fault. So Shantideva says whenever anything negative happens to you with another person seems to be very negative to you, think of that person like a teacher or like an emanation of the enlightened beings or an emanation of your teachers, come to teach you patience, come to teach you relaxed joy in the face of adversity. So I think that point from Shantideva is very good for all Americans, but especially for Chicagoans. Who tend to be a, what is it, cruiser and bruiser bunch? As opposed to, say, Californians who go, well, whatever. So I think we'll meditate for 10 minutes, and then we'll take a break for lunch, and come back at 2 o'clock. When we come back, We'll start with if anyone wants to have questions or just discussion for the first little bit while other people wander in. We can keep, if you think of anything you want to talk about or bring out from we discussed this morning, then we can do that. And then after that in the afternoon, we'll go in how sleep and dream yoga are used in Tantra as kind of a portal to understanding death and dying. And for breathing, I think we'll do that breathing exercise where we first contemplate how death is certain. And then we try to think anyone, we don't know a single person 500 years old, very few even 100 years old, a few more 90 years old, perhaps a few 80 years old. But as we go down the ladder, up the ladder, there's fewer and fewer of them. One of the great Mongolian lamas died last year, age 99. That's pretty good. But 100, 102, 103, there's not so many of them. 110, they become decidedly more rare. 120, I mean, that's like a sure thing for a reverse mortgage. And so we do that with meditation first, the uncertainty of time, and try to just reflect on how some people die in the womb, some coming out, some as kids, some as teens, some as young people, some middle-aged, some older. And that there's no certainty and it's no reliance on health, because some people, healthy people, just kick the bucket like that, and other people, unhealthy, live on longer. There's very little reference. And thirdly, how at the time of death, all external possessions are lost, all friendships and relatives are left behind, and finally, even this own body is gone, and all we're left with is our own spirit, our own soul. And when we finish that meditation, just breathe in one lifetime, breathe out one lifetime, as though each breath were a complete lifetime. And just Rinpoche Maki Panaki Gichi Kyapa Manamba Meba Yon Konde Kondu Pelwar Show. The thing at the end of the day is considered very important in the Buddhist world, that we finish every day as though it were our last day. We'll look at that a little bit more this afternoon. But we never know if we have another day or don't have another day. And sometimes we think healthy people will live longer, and well, of course we should, plan for the best, but hope for the best and plan for the best, but also prepare for the worst. And in that way, if we keep each day perfect, then our life as a whole can become perfect. I've mentioned before in some of my talks, one of my Zen teachers, who was the head of the Rinzai school in Japan, when I met him, he gave me one of his meditation calligraphies. And they sort of sit under their own personal tree of enlightenment, and they make a letter or a calligraphy piece, and it's taken as an object of meditation. And the one he gave me was every moment, every day, perfect day. But living the perfect life really means keeping every moment, every breath clean, clear, as Lama Yeshe used to put it. And every day clean, clear. So if moment by moment we can live each moment in perfection, then our whole life becomes perfect. That doesn't mean that no soap operas happen to us, no unpleasant things happen to us. Doesn't mean that we don't occasionally get something wrong. When I say we, it's in the sense of you guys, not me. What is it? The other plural as opposed to the royal plural. But it means when we try to do that in a conscious way, it becomes in a way the perfect spiritual practice. The idea that I can keep each moment completely clean, clear. I can keep each day completely clean, clear. And clean there doesn't have a moralistic sense. It just means I can see the natural beauty and the natural perfection in each moment. And clear means not to get tied up or entangled by whatever is going on. So obviously, if you're in the middle of a car accident, there's going to be some disaster there. But if your mind is relaxed and joyful, then whatever comes out of it comes out in the best way. And even I think our body and mind are pre-programmed to behave that way, even without training. And that's one of the reasons why, with training, we can go to enlightenment in one lifetime, or we can achieve greatness, spiritual greatness. For instance, when I was a very young man once, I heard a clang and a crunch, and I looked up, and there's 2 half-ton trucks spinning towards me at what seemed like 60 or 70 miles an hour. And I had no idea what I should do. And fortunately, because I'd done quite a bit of martial art training just up until that point, as I looked towards them, I knew there was no way to get out of it. But I figured the bit behind the door and the frame of the cab, the long soft bit above the wheel, was probably my best chance of survival. And there was no sense of fear because the body had kicked in that kind of chemistry. And this thing that lasted perhaps a second seemed like it was about 15 minutes as it sort of just came towards me in slow motion. And I took a step towards it rather than away from it, and jumped up and spread my body out evenly over the whole soft bit. And it just hit me bang like that and sent me flying maybe, 75 feet, something like that. But fortunately, I ended up in the field rather than on the cement or on the rocks or something like that, and on a soft field with plenty of corn, and I landed on my head, which for an Irishman is always the best thing to land on because it's the most protected of all of our bodily parts. And although I had a bit of a a headache for the next half hour. And I was unconscious for maybe 15 minutes or so, and I had a cracked arm and a couple of cracked ribs. I came out of it without any real damage whatsoever, and basically had very little unpleasant experience from it. Tough breathing. I couldn't do my boxing for the next couple of days, and kind of those broken ribs and only having one arm. But other than that, so this idea that we can stay in that state of calm, clear is something very natural to humans. Our body is pre-programmed to throw us into it in the time of catastrophe. And in all we do with meditation and spiritual training is we learn to sort of cultivate that on a deeper level and bring it into our ordinary lives when our body chemistry doesn't throw us into it and doesn't force it upon us and force us into it. Then we learn to cultivate it as a life form.